This is willpower.
90% of the planet is consuming caffeine. Like, there is no other substance, not even alcohol. There's nothing that compares to caffeine. But here's what's interesting is 90% of people that consume caffeine want to consume less.
Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Weitzel. Together, we explore health optimization tools that propel you from comfort to courage, illuminating the path together to a remarkable life through breath, cold, and biohacking.
Shawn Wells, welcome to the Willpower Podcast, episode 2.
Part two.
Part 2, yeah. I'm thankful to sit here with you in this beautiful sound shed and to catch up officially and formally, because we do get a chance to catch up on all the world tours we're doing.
This episode is brought to you by Soundshed Studios. He's really amazing. Just to give him a real plug, he's like designing all the studios for Yoga with Adrian, Joe Rogan, all his stuff, not only like his
Luke,
studio,
right? He's building one for Luke.
But like his house and like all this other stuff. Yeah, Luke's Story, like this guy is, he's doing Dana White. Like, so anyway, this is a great place if you're in the Austin area. Record here.
Yeah, it's super beautiful.
We don't make money off that, but I just thought I'd plug them.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's amazing to be here with you.
Yeah.
I love you, and it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. We have these little run-ins around the world and little conferences or big conferences, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about a lot today, and I want it to feel a little bit freeform, but there's a hot topic, Paraxanthine.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We gotta make sure we cover some of that, because there's a lot of conversation in the market. I don't know if you've been hearing it because you've developed it, but I want to talk a little bit about Paraxanthine and sort of the arc of the journey of this molecule.
Yeah, it's been a journey, a hero's journey, if you will. Like, people that really know me from other compounds I brought to market, including energy compounds. I'm the energy formula guy. Uh-huh. But they were TeaCrine and Dynamine that have been used in a lot of nootropics, pre-workouts, fat burners, energy drinks. Paraxanthine was kind of my next iteration. What I liked about it is that it is a straightforward message because it's a metabolite of caffeine. And people know and understand caffeine, whereas some of these other compounds, ephedrine, epinephrine, TeaCrine, Dynamine, like, it's not as straightforward. Basically, what's cool about Paraxanthine is every human being on the planet has had Paraxanthine in their body. Mm-hmm. If you think about that, there's literally been billions of doses of Paraxanthine in people's bodies because everyone that's consumed caffeine has metabolized it into Paraxanthine. There's 3 metabolites it converts into: theobromine, theophylline, paraxanthine. About 70 to 80% is paraxanthine. The next question is, well, if I've had caffeine and I've had paraxanthine as a result, why would I need to take paraxanthine instead? And that simple answer is, 1, caffeine has a fair amount of toxicity or side effects to it. It's really not the beneficial compound. Paraxanthine is. And caffeine is in plants to really be toxic to bugs as like an insect repellent. That's its purpose in plants.
But Paraxanthine is the one that sort of gives us the feel good from the caffeine hit.
Exactly. And also add to this, there is the CYP1A2 gene, and there are fast and slow metabolizers. About 60% are slow metabolizers. Now, there's a spectrum even at that. I'm on the very slow end, and so I have almost all the side effects and very little benefit. Mm-hmm. So the range, the bioindividuality of caffeine is 1.5 to 10.5 hour half-life. That is a 7x difference, a massive difference. So these are the people, the fast metabolizers, that, by the way, have almost no side effects, but have almost no benefit because they metabolize it so fast that they can have the caffeine and go straight to bed. And then there's people like me that can have caffeine in the morning and it disrupts my sleep in the evening. because days later I still may be metabolizing caffeine. And with paraxanthine, you're just going straight to the thing that you want. And that's why it's so experiential. It doesn't have the side effects. It doesn't have the blood pressure, heart rate issues. And it has all the benefits like increased dopamine, increased serotonin, acetylcholine, serotonin. You have increased BDNF for neuroplasticity, increased glutathione and catalase, decreased beta amyloid plaque, and increased nitric oxide and blood flow to the brain via PDE9 inhibition. So basically every way the brain ages, there's a lack of blood flow as you age with nitric oxide. There's increased oxidative stress. There's decreased neuroplasticity. There is increased beta amyloid plaque. There's decreased dopamine associated with like Parkinson's. This is reversing all those. And this is why we're seeing that we're doing this e-gaming study right now where we pulled some early data and we saw with caffeine, like a declination with continued use. With paraxanthine, we saw the opposite, where it was continuing to get better and better and better with continued use because it's literally healing the brain. So there's an acute effect, but there's like a neuroprotective effect over time as well.
And if people are like told to not have caffeine or told to stay off coffee, or what's sort of the discourse across that landscape for having paraxanthine in them or just taking it as a single unit?
Well, I mean, like liability is liability, but I'll tell you that dramatically less toxic, but our GRAS, generally recognized as safe level, is set at the same level caffeine is, because they said, well, caffeine's 400 milligrams, so you get 400 milligrams. But we're far, far safer. We don't see the sleep disruption, the arrhythmias, the brain fog, the anxiety jitters. The crash.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
no crash.
We don't
no
see,
sweaty pits.
Yeah, we don't see any of that. Yeah, exactly. There's so many side effects, especially if you are a slow metabolizer, like I am, like where you have a lot of the side effects and again, very little benefit. So yeah, that's been the thing, is that it's super experiential and it is a true nootropic. In one of our studies, we had a 10K race. We did a multitasking test, which real science is just task switching because you can't multitask. And we gave that test before and after the race. We also gave them, there was a crossover. So there was a placebo group, paraxanthine group, caffeine group, and a paraxanthine and caffeine group. The caffeine group increased mental errors after the 10K race, 23%. The caffeine and paraxanthine group performed slightly better, like maybe 16 or 18, if I remember right. The placebo group was an increase, as expected, from just general fatigue. I think it was maybe like 8%. And paraxanthine was a decrease of mental errors, 10%. So they actually improved after a 10K race because of the paraxanthine. And then if you look at like the delta, because this isn't caffeine, it isn't just kind of like caffeine, it's a wholly different thing. That's my point, is that the delta between the two, meaning the difference between caffeine and paraxanthine, is like 30-some%. There was a 23% increase in mental errors versus a 10% decrease in mental errors. So what we found is that the more you're fatigued, or potentially the older you are, like I'm 50, a lot of our tests, just as a result, like our studies are with, 18 to 23-year-old males in college, right? Like it's just your study population. But we think we would see even better results with older males, females, whatever. That the tough part is just recruiting for that, because just getting people that are not students to come into a campus, people that are older but don't have any diseases, aren't on any medications, it just gets a lot more expensive to run that study. But we did do a study with a preclinical with mice, and I'll give you a chance to speak in a second.
That's great. I'm like, it's great.
But anyway, it's this study with mice where imagine if there's like this pool like of black, like inky black water, so they can't see into the water. And imagine it's about the size of like a 4-person tabletop at a restaurant, a circular table. And you show the mice where the ledge is on the edge of what would be the table or circle, or in this case, the pool. And then you drop them in the middle. And then they have to swim and then figure out where that ledge is. So when we did it placebo, it took like 63 seconds for the aged mouse. So we were able to look at aged with mice. It's a lot easier. 63 seconds. With paraxanthine, 20 seconds.
Wow.
That's not like a little, that's not like a 10%. Yeah. Like, that's like a dramatic difference. And that's why theoretically we believe that, and going back to that case with the athletes, like the more exhausted you are, the more aged you are, like the more like these benefits are going to be more pronounced, like BDNF and blood flow and dopamine and serotonin, acetylcholine, glutathione, catalase, all this stuff. But that's what's exciting. Like Michael Pollan in his book Caffeine, who I love on the psychedelic side of things, but he talks about caffeine essentially as a come at a cost ingredient, and paraxanthine is not. Like that's what's great. It's a win-win-win. Like we're getting the benefits of energy and focus and mood, and it's healing the brain.
Yeah, so cool. And it's like I've been off caffeine for a year and a half. And I think for a while, I somehow I got confused along the way where I am a slow metabolizer, and then realized, actually, I think I thought I was a fast metabolizer because I was like having sweats, having all these things come up, and just really not reacting well to caffeine. And then I thought about, well, what do I really want? Let me go off caffeine and see what happens. And what I really want is a morning ritual. What I really want is, I'll be doing like a salted warm beverage, or I'll be doing something in the morning that's some kind of like tea with a coconut milk, but like decaf and or herbal tea, right? And so what I really want is a morning ritual to put some powdered mushrooms in, or to put collagen, whatever I'm making, right, in the morning, so that it feels like a warm cup, even when it's like 110 degrees in Austin. I want something warm in the morning. So the big difference for me was that I noticed I didn't really need the caffeine. I have a lot of energy as it is. I'm doing lots of other things right in my life. So I didn't really need the caffeine. And then it made my sleep better. And then when we first had the conversation about paraxanthine and I was trying it, it was like a big difference in the sort of how you feel versus getting up and having that response to caffeine. Like, especially for me, like I get it's bio-individual, but for me, for sure, I noticed that difference. And back then it was just like, well, I can go to Shawn and I can get these little pills and figure out paraxanthine. But now you've made it much more accessible, right? Because there's this big thing, and I have this with clients a lot, where people are averse to taking so many supplements, or just supplements and like swallowing pills. I have one client who's so sweet who's like, can you send me a picture of the size of the capsule first? Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to swallow the whole thing. Because people are they have aversions to that. So now you've created...
I worked in nursing homes for 10 years. I know. With
take it.
Crushing them up into pudding or applesauce. Yeah, it was insane. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you found an even better way, right? To dose America or dose the world on paraxanthine. So tell us a bit about that, because I have a special place in my heart for consumer packaged goods and canned beverages and all of that. So I want to share with everyone the best way to take paraxanthine right now.
Well, there's a variety, and to take a step back, this is what's shocking, is 90% of the planet, this is a real number, consumes caffeine in some form or another every day. 90% of the planet may not go to the bathroom every day, eat every day, shower every day. 90% of the planet is consuming caffeine. Like, there is no other substance, not even alcohol. There's nothing that compares to caffeine. But here's what's interesting is 90% of people that consume caffeine want to consume less. 9 out of 10 people are consuming something that they know isn't healthy for them, but there's the cognitive dissonance of justifying it because of what we call a habituation, which is just physiologic dependence. It's so ingrained into our culture, and we justify it. Similar to alcohol, but if you look at how Gen Z is basically abstaining from alcohol, going a very different direction. There's even a bar here in Austin called Sun's Bar where, they're having CBD and, paraxanthine maybe, and, whatever, some of these healthier substances that are lifting them, making them more social or cerebral or whatever, but are not come at a cost ingredients. And to see how much Gen Z has moved away, where like in my generation, you always had to like tell people like why you weren't drinking. And then people would be like, well, why aren't you drinking? It's like, well,
I'm a designated driver.
Yeah, or they think like you had like some alcohol issues or something. No.
So dosing paraxanthine, like if people are wanting to find it, they can't go to their local mocktail bar and say, where's the paraxanthine? Where do they go? What do they do next?
I think it's coming. So the youth especially are going to gravitate to healthier decisions. Like they are looking at their Aura rings. They are, drinking these CBD drinks instead of alcohol. And I think caffeine is very ingrained into our society, but where I think we'll see the fastest adoption is, yes, biohackers, and certainly in anti-aging, maybe like in nootropic spaces, gaming, like e-gaming spaces, which has become monster money. It's crazy. I never even was aware of like how, like it literally dwarfs like the World Series and like all these things combined. But I think Gen Z is going to quickly adopt paraxanthine in all its forms. I really believe that because people are just done with these come at a cost ingredients. Like, and we no longer have to do that. There are smarter choices. And so, yes, there are various forms of paraxanthine. I'm full disclosure and an investor in Update, and that is a nootropic clean energy drink. Natural ingredients, no sugar, no artificial flavors, colors, sweeteners. And it's healthy for you and your brain. And Ben Greenfield, Luke Story, Josh Trent, they're all investors on it. And people are loving it. We have pre-workouts that are using it. There's one called Mind FK, I'll say. There's another one called Euphoric with an IQ that I love and take quite often.
And those are like powders or pills or
powders,
something?
And then there's some pill products that are nootropic or kind of mood boosters. And then there is a company, Peak Performance, that's just solo paraxanthine capsules if you want to try it that way.
Nice. And I've actually been on like a Zoom call with someone who was like having a rough morning and hadn't gotten great sleep and all this and had an update and was just drinking it. And I was like watching as I went through the course of this like half an hour, 40-minute call. And it was really interesting for me. By the end, I even like made a comment and he was like, yeah, this thing was working because being really sluggish and within that period of time of the call, just feeling like more positive energy, more awake, more alert, and I just was the recipient of that, right? So it's interesting to watch and my passion of we have this interesting connect as we talk about Update specifically, we talk about this because my passion project when I was in my young 20s was bringing Red Bull to market. And really what that felt like to introduce something that, especially back then, we talked about as a functional beverage. But we know now that there's like a better way to skin that cat, right? We know that there's a sort of a better way to do it. But that was sort of the entree for all of these energy beverages into the North American market. And really understanding, I feel so blessed in some ways to understand the level of intricacy because it wasn't like you went into a store and someone was like, what are the ingredients in Coca-Cola? Tell me. No one cared. No one gave a shit.
Right.
But with Red Bull, people were like, first they were like, I'm not going to pay $3 for this 8-ounce can. What the F? Get out of my store or my bar, right? There was like an interesting pushback because it was more expensive and people were like, why would it cost more money? And then there was this conversation about how do we educate people on what a functional beverage is, right? Whether we agree that Red Bull is functional or not anymore, but it's where I learned about glucuronolactone and I understood taurine, aminos and taurine and the B vitamins. And like how it synergistically worked together, how 80 milligrams of caffeine was less than a cup of coffee, especially Starbucks. I'm
not anti-Red Bull. When
I just think it's interesting that the evolution is like, I don't want to drink Red Bull when I can drink something that's more optimal for me across the board, like period, full stop, right? And a lot of the mimic brands that came out after Red Bull just laid in more size, more sweet, more, all the shit that comes with being in America.
The Bang and Monsters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's like a better way to do it. And that to me feels like excellent. Okay, great. That's the answer. That's the wave of the future, right? And so that feels like a very attainable, approachable way for people to dose themselves with something that's going to give them the lift without all the crap.
Yeah, because people are trapped in this loop of like caffeinating all day long.
Yeah.
Maybe they're even taking Adderall. And then, then they're in the evening, it's like alcohol, and maybe it's like Ambien, Lunesta, Xanax, whatever. And it's like, this is the loop.
Yeah.
And there definitely is the better way. And I think, like I said, Gen Z is like looking at the people that raised them and are like, we don't have to do this.
Yeah, and this weird culture of like, I'm going to take all the uppers to get up, and then when I hit the 8 o'clock hour, I'm going to take all the downers to get down. It's like really falsifying what, I think it's also why light is coming to the forefront more and more. I mean, we've all been talking about it in the biohacking space, but why light is coming to the forefront more and more is how we use like nature and the sun and grounding and all these things to be able to get back into some circadian rhythm that every time I say circadian rhythm, I'm always like, shout out to Molly Easton. But really feeling like other tools and ways we can use this.
I know how much time you're spending on your phone and your computer all day and into the early evening, because that happens to me too. And unfortunately, not every night can I shut down my technology in order to be able to manage light in my life, right? We talk about health optimization. There's something that we can do about it. So I found this blue light blocking glasses company just a few months back, and I've been wearing them ever since. Several of my clients have them, and even clients with prescription glasses have gotten the adjustments made so that they can have a pair of filter optics to wear for their computer work or to wear for post-sunset time when, if you haven't heard already on some of the episodes in this podcast, we really need to be managing light in our life to be able to create health optimization and, very importantly, sleep optimization, right? The better sleep we get, the more we can recover, and we're only as fit as what we can recover from. So managing blue light in your house, if you're scrolling that doom scroll through Instagram at night, if you're checking out your lover on the side, all of that, put those blue blockers on. No judgment. Filter optics is the best way to go, managing your blue light and technology, managing your health optimization. Check them out at filteroptics.com. Use code WELLPOWER, just like this podcast, so you can think about me late at night when you pop those red lenses on. WELLPOWER will get you a big deal. Support this podcast, and then we can be in it together. Stay off the phone if you can, and if not, get yourself filter optics when the sun sets. Keep everything changing.
I want to turn over a little bit, because when you talk about e-gamers, it makes me feel like I want to chat a bit about the topic of mental health. And not because there's anything wrong with e-gaming, but I think the more we all step into this fifth dimension of technology and spending a lot of time, even though we're with people across screens, not in live community where we're actually having either skin to skin contact or just being in a group where there's oxytocin availability and doing things together functionally, I think a lot about the more and more we are all spending time alone, right? This post flu world, all the things that have happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and gamers and people not being in school for a little bit, and then Zoom, and then all this digital age has really created, I think, a tide of a shift in the way that we do mental wellness. And I just want to talk a little bit about that with you, because I think that I know that you have a background in navigating some of those pieces. And just transparently, you and I have spoken more recently when I'm like, oh, this is the first time in the eras of my life that I was faced with some anxiety over things. And I had no idea how it could be so intense. And some of that partnered with working alone in an office. We're entrepreneuring it. You have clients, I have clients, but we spend a lot of time on that computer and a lot of time on our own. Just what that you feel like that's doing to work culture, people, and why it might even be important to force ourselves to get out in the thick of community more often.
It's really interesting. I think a lot of people feel blessed post 2020 to be remote working, but everyone's working from home. And I believe at least that hybrid model of going to the WeWork or co-working space or whatever is really important. Even if you're not interacting with these people at these places, the energy of people being around you, of not feeling isolated, because think about what that did to us during the last 4 or 5 years with the isolation. There is a really deep disconnect. Like suicide rates, depression rates went through the roof. Immune health dropped dramatically. And it was an epidemic, being isolated. And so I do think it's interesting you bring up e-gaming, because at least some of these people are, I think about some friends I've had that are more like shut-ins, that for them it is like a means of socialization, that at least they have that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree that getting around other people is key. And I used to love being in an office. I used to love, like, yes, it's a pain, like waiting in traffic and all these things. We all hate that part, but I
like
can
a good
tell
brainstorm and just like really inspiring.
Yeah, like whiteboarding, interacting with people, going to lunch with your teammates. It's so different. I can tell you, like, I formulate for a ton of companies, and when I do these, what I call like 2-day breakthroughs, when I go with the C-suite of this, like the CEO, CFO, for those listening that don't know what a C-suite is, but it's basically your leadership team at one of these supplement companies, biohacking companies, beverage company, functional food company that I work with. I'll sit down with them for 2 days and like work through where their bottlenecks are, like work through their branding, think through innovation and all these things. And when I work with them on these 2 days and we go out to dinner together, like outside of the office, I have had the most amazing relationships that go on for years. And when I don't do that, and I just go ahead and work with them after a Zoom call, I've had a lot of like issues come up, and we don't feel nearly as close. There isn't as much of a deep level of trust or connection. And I have learned just repeatedly, like, what makes a difference for me is during the last 4 or 5 years, even when travel was difficult, I would still travel and go to my clients, go to my customers. And it makes all the difference, especially when no one else is.
I agree.
Hugs and handshakes.
Yeah, hugs and handshakes. And on the health landscape too, I made the decision just sort of post COVID, when we were allowed to get out and all the things, that I was like, okay, in my year-long containers, when I'm working with females, I'm going to travel to them because they couldn't travel to me, or retreats were still not like acceptable. Mm-hmm. So traveling to them, it's part of the reason with all the Sherpa breath and cold stuff. I'm like, I'm going to go to the markets, right? Instead of having the markets have to come to me. And it just has felt like it's a necessary piece of it, especially when I'm talking about modalities like breathwork and cold. You can't ever create the container on Zoom that feels the same.
Yeah.
And I think I've noticed, whether it's like I'm getting older or just navigating different things in my life, I've noticed more and more, and been reading studies and research really around these critical elements that are bringing people. And with the gamers, it's no slight on gamers. Like, cool, if you want to game. I always think about my brother, like e-gaming in like a super dark room, even when it's like 2:00 in the afternoon, he's getting no sunshine. He's like got headsets and he's yelling at people, or, cheering people on, or whatever's going on. But it just feels like, are we isolating ourselves in a way that's also just like our physiology is like, what time of day is it? What's going on? And
that's a great point. Yeah.
A lot of the research I've been reading, and I have a lot of clients going through perimenopause and menopause, and just hormones and the shifts in our bodies and all of these things really contributing to loneliness, depression, anxiety. And over again, we talk about so much science and so much research in the space of health optimization. And I think community continues to rise. And I know I can say this to you because we've been in so many communities together. You drove me in your hot ride down to Texas and was like, here's a new community you're going to meet, whether you like it or not. We're going to all be friends, and that shit has been so monumentally important in my life, really, to be connected, because the one shout out research I was reading recently was like, women age 45 to 49 are that's the most likely window of time for them to kill themselves, because hormone shifts happen, right? And that's a little different than being lonely, perhaps, but also you just layer that on with like a quarantine or one or two other things going on in their life that feel challenging. And I think that we can tend to go sideways, and it's like, what are the resources that are out there for people? Yeah,
you bring up light, and I just read a study. I need to pull the full study, but it said that the number one contributor to Alzheimer's was like above genetics, diet, all kinds of different factors, was actually junk light.
Whoa.
Junk light exposure, like that we should not be getting all this light exposure at night. It makes sense, like if you've ever done like a defrag on your disk drive on like, your computer. I mean, this is literally what's happening at night with your brain, is your brain is getting cleaned out. It's kind of like the autophagy, mitophagy kind of stuff. Memories are getting stored appropriately. There's like lipofuscin and like all this stuff that is like, getting cleaned, and that's not happening when we're getting exposed to light. We're blocking the release of melatonin from the pineal gland. What's really, another thing that's really interesting, I read another study too, just a day or two ago. There's 400 times the amount of melatonin in your gut than there is from the pineal gland. So this goes back to, all these neurotransmitters, all these things, hormones like that are in our gut. And, it's always being called our second brain, but maybe our brain should be called our second gut. I don't know. Like, they're actually together, like when you're pre-birth as a fetus, they separate as you grow. Like, so they literally are connected. So it's really interesting.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. So nootropics and gut-brain connection and your gut instincts and all of the things that I have so beautifully gotten to watch you root into and blossom and having conversations around conferences in the plant medicine space, right? Altered states, whether that be something that's smaller microdose world, the presentation I saw you give that really, it was just so eloquent how you spoke specifically about whether it be something that's more like a chemical substance like an LSD or something that's more natural of the plant world, let's call it plant medicine, and really sharing and wanted you to share a little bit about, I hope that we're past the time where people are shocked by these conversations on microdosing and plant medicine, and that I think the world is, if they don't know now, they're hearing it here first. This is the way the world is going to go, right? And whether that means big pharma gets involved or not, I don't need to get into that political discussion per se. But I would love for you to share some of the statistics and the things that were so mind-blowing to me, and just really some of the ideas that are coming out of working with people who are navigating challenging disease states, mental well-being, et cetera, or just life issues coming up within the plant medicine world or within sort of that microdosing, clinicalized space.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pieces there, but when I look at the research, and I present on this a lot, whether you're looking at psilocybin, LSD, DMT, MDMA, there's typically anywhere from a 50 to 80% cure rate of clinical depression, of PTSD, where they no longer meet the definition for that criteria anymore. And these are well-run studies where they're getting administered, in...
This isn't someone on an art card, Burning Man, being like, woohoo!
Yeah, where like set and setting is well thought out, like integration and facilitation is thought out, where this may go 90 days, 180 days, where they're kind of followed up with, and it's gone. And obviously, big pharma, I mean, where's the, Chris Rock always talks about like the comeback, the money's in the comeback. What was the last thing they cured? Like, polio. That's what he said. Like the money's in the comeback. They're no different than the drug dealer on the street corner. So they want us taking these things every day. And FDA is obviously has demonized these plant medicines. And you have to ask why when there's these massive cure rates. And when I look at all the data on SSRIs, 2017, 2022, there was meta-analyses done, meaning where they look at all of the studies on SSRIs. And both the meta-analyses, and these are from like the most prestigious journals, both the meta-analyses basically concluded that they either have no effect or they're doing more harm than good.
Wow.
So if those are being prescribed with epidemic levels of depression, and we're not allowing people to have access to these things that have cure rates of 50 to 80%, you can pass a drug through that has like a 5% benefit on the 10th try. And so you have to think about why that is. And we're also seeing big pharma jump on some of this plant medicine thing with isolating out compounds to do what they call psychoplastogens, where they're kind of removing the God from, or the journey, or the spiritual aspect, or the kind of deep healing aspect of these medicines. Whether your journey is joyous or quite difficult, it's kind of like whatever comes up, whatever's needed, right? They're removing that aspect. And what a psychoplastogen is, like, you're basically getting the neuroplasticity, but of course, you need to take it every day.
So it's like without any of the revelation that you might have in an experience.
So think about it. That's the model. The model it's no different. It's called continuity in business. I work with customers on this all the time. It's like the Netflix model. You want continuity in your revenue, right? Like, you want a comeback. You don't want to sell someone one thing one time and never have them come back because you made such a great thing. Everything's about, how do we get monthly incremental revenue?
How do we get 3 DVDs in the mail, and then when we mail one back, we get the next?
Yeah. And that's psychoplastogens for big pharma. So,
yeah. And I didn't know a lot about that, and I think that brings a little bit of a level of frustration. And what do you say to people? Do you still have people that come to you when you have conversations like this, or wasn't there there was a gentleman who stood up in one of your presentations who was like, "This stuff is all illegal," or whatever, just kind of gave some grief.
Yeah.
But you were speaking specifically to things in clinical use, right, with medical practitioners, and in many ways. And do you still have people that come up to you and have conversations about, like, hey, I'm sort of nervous to use these substances, or are we sure that they're safe? Or, that conversation does come my direction as well. Or people are like scared or trepidatious to step into that realm. It's like, what do you say to people like that?
I mean, there was a time when, Black people voting or owning land was illegal. There was a time when women voting was illegal. There was a time when equality was illegal. In your heart of hearts, you know what's right.
Mm-hmm.
In my heart of hearts, whether you, and I've made this plead before, whether you believe these are for you, that's irrelevant. Because I've talked about, if I didn't go down this path, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. Or when I've talked on stage, I say, I wouldn't be standing on this stage right now. I would be dead. I was very much suicidal. And if it wasn't from literally killing myself, it would have been from killing myself with work. And that was the path I was heading down, with just constant health issues. There are people that serve our country that are veterans and soldiers and EMTs and people that have seen a lot of horrible things, people that have gone through sexual traumas, that they've tried the SSRIs, they've tried the therapy. And are you okay? I'm asking right now, are you okay with letting them die? That's my question. Because if I didn't have access to it, and by the way, as a fairly affluent, well-connected white male, I had access to it.
And you still had to look a little. You still had to do some research and look and dig it up. It's wasn't easily available.
Exactly.
So
I had
how hard is it for so many
amazing facilitators?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that don't. And there's a lot of people that are in difficult situations all over the world, in war-torn countries. They're in countries where there's sex slavery and, are going through this trauma right now. I just want people to have access to these tools. Does it need to be safe to the point you're asking? Yes, 100%. I do worry about there being too broad of access and, someone having mushrooms and alcohol and LSD and like what, like all in one night. And no, like that's not how they're used. Like that isn't how I'd recommend they be used. They're tools, and they're powerful tools, and they're teachers. And so being in a safe situation is critical. But how, like one of the big lessons that you learn through these experiences is learning how to speak your truth, learning your autonomy and your sovereignty, learning how to speak up for your safety and own that and trust your intuition. To me, it's about speaking your truth, trusting your intuition. Those are like the through lines that always come up in these journeys. You know, all these people like, you know, I finally can say it, I'm gay, or like I should quit this job, or I'm going to get the divorce, like, you know, whatever it is, like, you know, they all of a sudden speak up and own it. Or, you know, I'm tired of like people looking at me and laughing because I'm overweight. You know, it's like, I've heard it, like I've been in literally more than 100 journeys, and I've seen all kinds of things where people want to be witnessed, speak their truth, and realize they are sovereign. We are all children of God. We're all beautiful creations, and we're all equally powerful. And what's insane is if I say I'm incredible and I'm amazing and I'm the best at this, that somehow everyone else feels like that's a slight. Yeah. That's a you problem, not a me problem. Yeah. That's a you problem. And when you're in journeys, you realize how many you problems you have.
Yeah. And the third thing I would add to the list, if you would allow me to add this to the list, is I think people are, will you allow me to add it to the list?
Yeah.
I think that people are selling themselves short all fucking day long. And I think, I mean, I know it from clients, I know it from myself, but the thing that in the journey spaces to me was a real aha moment is both the things that you said, including sovereignty, meaning I'm responsible for me. And then also this notion of, I'm just like selling myself short all day long about the things I could actually accomplish and do in the world, and the way that I look and the way that I feel, and all of these little like trifles I'm letting run my life, versus the person I was. And I just this morning was talking on a podcast, the little girl I was when I was 10, she was awesome. And that's still me. And then we spend all this time layering the constructs on, and then like hopefully the journey spaces lets us peel some of them away so we can feel better about ourselves. And then you're oh so right. Then when you're finally like, I'm amazing, people are like, well, what's wrong with me? Or why are you saying that? Or you're not that amazing, or it's all ego. And you're like, but I'm just trying to fight my way back to good and baseline. And
me being great has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. It's like, no, there's no comparison trap there. Right.
Right. I mean, you have to pursue your greatness. And you're so right. Like, one, I've kind of come up with this saying a mantra, if you will, that I repeat to myself, that none of it's your fault. All of it's your responsibility. Mm-hmm. Absolve yourself of the shame, blame, and guilt. Or if you're Christian, you know, it's just like, you know, Christ like forgave you for your sins, or what, you know, that's that idea. Like every time you pray, every time you ask for forgiveness, it's gone. Okay, you're absolved. Move on. Don't stay in the past. What are you going to do now? What's your decision now? Who are you going to be now? That's what you're responsible for. Take responsibility and ownership of that. That's the idea of the extreme ownership, you know, idea that you can change your life, you can dictate your path if you just take control of it and own it. Stop blaming other people. Stop playing the victim. Everyone's playing the victim. Like there's some power in that, and there's real power in just owning where you are in your life and saying, I want to be here, and here's how I'm going to get there. Yeah. And that comes out in the journey space. I feel like another thing that came through for me is that a lot of people want healing because they think they're broken. And to the point you made before, if I realized that as a child, I was perfect, I was beautiful, I felt wonderful, I was amazing then, what happened between now and then? And I've even worked with a hypnotist where my child self got to talk to my now self, and my child self said, wow, this guy's amazing. Like I had no idea that I would become this.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as the adult self, I always feel like it's not good enough.
Yeah.
But if my child was to look at me, he's like, whoa, that's cool. So
I feel like my child would say that, and my child would also be like, snap out of it. Like share moment, just being like, snap out of it. You're fine. Let's go. Let's do it. You know?
Let's play.
Yeah.
So the idea is like, you're not broken. Like I tend to think of like these journeys, not as like this massive healing journey and you need to be fixed and you're broken, because then you might stay in that loop of like, I need healing. I need healing. I need healing. I need healing. I'm going to work on this. And I've seen people in that space never get out of that loop.
Right. They're like 48 journeys a year. And you're like, whoa, hey, this is integration. It's not optional.
Yes. And to give some clarity around all the journeys I've done, a lot of it is because I'm a biochemist, because I'm speaking on these topics, I'm exploring different experiences, facilitators, combinations. Like it's part of my research, if you will. Yeah. But I tend to think of ourselves like being made by God as like this Ferrari or Lamborghini or McLaren or whatever cool car
bro
you
energy.
like.
It's great. It's
yeah,
good.
like some cool, beautiful, like handmade, I think of, this Italian Ferrari that's so gorgeous, but we get like mud and dirt on it, right? And we just need to clean it off sometimes. Like the trauma, the micro trauma, the large traumas is just dirt on the beautiful vehicle. And we can just get it washed sometimes and realize again how beautiful it is. And we just drive out clean. And that's it. And I do think that trauma is a part of life. And it's not something that you can avoid, especially when you talk about a collection of even micro traumas add up.
Yeah.
And, we've talked with Tom Cole about like trauma can also be too little. I think it's too little, too slow instead of too much, too fast. We tend to think of trauma as like too much, too fast, like a rape, a murder, whatever, like these really intense situations.
No, but it could be like your parents not listening or hearing you or neglecting you. Yeah. And then people hear that word neglect and they think, oh, neglect, you can't neglect your kids. But there are moments in your life when your parents are making everything happen in the household and you're feeling like, I'm not seen, I'm not heard.
Yeah. And
that piece of neglect can just, in a 6-year-old, can be like, I don't feel seen. And that can feel like a microtrauma.
Yeah.
I don't know how much, or if you have done EMDR therapy, but I've been in a big cycle of it now. And the very first thing that my beautiful therapist asked me was, do you feel like you make your list of traumas in the beginning? And then she said to me, do you feel like, I just want to ask you this question out of the gate. Do you feel like you have trauma? And I was like, well, you made me make a list. So like, there's my list. And she's like, that's not what I'm asking you. Do you think you have trauma? And I said, well, I mean, I had to make a list. And so of course I thought of things, but like, nah, like no one held me down and burned me with cigarettes when I was little, that's like, and then she's like, oh, this is a good place to start because it's all relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a relatively fortunate life in many ways and upbringing, and it could have been so much worse. And also shit happens and our brains process in moments of things and other kids and life and parental structure and that these traumas come up. And so I think it's an encouraging thing. And just even to see myself be resistant to that word, thinking like, oh, well, I don't need to address those things when I really clearly needed to address some of them because it's been really helpful in sort of opening my mindset and the person that I am to the next version, the future Kristen.
Well, I also think that trauma, like if I have become quite successful with significant trauma. If you look at probably Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, whatever, probably lots of trauma. Like some of our most successful people have trauma, and probably someone who has very little trauma is probably not that interesting of a person. I mean,
you mean like light and shadow side? Like some of it is actually functioning to support and bolster their like
it's
mini
hormesis.
superpower.
It's hormesis,
totally.
right? It is hormesis, like where it's giving you strength. Like anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as like the Native American saying would go. Like the problem that happens is, how are you going to interpret the trauma long term? Do you take it as a lesson, or do you build constructs and stories out of it and then keep building on those stories of stories of stories to create something that's not even real. And now is holding you back from speaking your truth, from owning how great you are, etc. So the trauma itself is a part of life. It's a necessary part of life. And there's no child or no adult that's going through life without trauma. The question is, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to interpret it? And then how are you going to move past it and not let it shape everything that you do moving forward?
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful.
Our plates are full. People are stressed to the max. Really, I'm feeling it. Are you feeling that lately? A lot of hormonal imbalance, a lot of conversation about my hormones are out of whack, they're imbalanced, I'm not sleeping well, I'm stressed out. And I did a solo episode on this mineral that is so, so important. It is game-changing to help you feel your best, and that's magnesium. So you can go listen to that solo-sode, and the reality is magnesium is an absolute must for keeping your hormones balanced and your body functioning optimally. Most of us are not getting enough of it from our diets alone, and that's why I'm here to remind you. Yes, you need to take a supplement. And yes, the one that I take is Bioptimizer's Magnesium Breakthrough, and it is by far the best. I've been using it personally for 6 years. I use it with all of my clients. It is so, so important because it has 7 different types of magnesium, the best ones, all in one capsule. Now, I'm taking 2 at night before I go to sleep because I got a little extra stress going on. But when you manage your sleep, your digestive health, and your stress, your hormones can rebalance. So I want you to support your system by using Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. Bioptimizers.com, BIOPTIMIZERS.com/wellpower, or you can use the code WellPower10 to save a little money, to support this podcast, and mostly to support your hormone balance, your sleep, and your stress. Bioptimizers.com. Check it out.
As we come to a close, I want to ask a couple things. If someone were to come to you and say, I'm not interested in plant medicine or paraxanthine or anything, but I'm dealing with a lot of navigating emotional states and, sadness or anxiety or just frustration with who I am in the world, are there 1 or 2 things that you would offer up to them that you feel like would help them with mental resiliency, emotional resiliency, or emotional fitness, we could even call it?
If they're not going to do
If they're not going to do plant medicine and you were going to, it could be biohacking, something in the biohacking landscape or anything else. Church, journaling, I don't know,
Yeah. So if I'm to look at, first off, going to the blue zones and what you learn there, or when I lived in Costa Rica, which is a blue zone where I live, Nosara, the idea of, like in Nosara, there's pura vida. It's pure life, right? Or, in these other places, you hear of like island time and like pura vida can be like hello, goodbye, but it can also be like, oh, fuck it. Like it's kind of like, well, it's like, screw it. Like, oh, you're like an hour and a half late. They're like, pura vida. It's like, it's kind of like, cool. And if I look at like Sardinia, Italy, and like these other places, people slow down. They're not as obsessed with the clock. They also, if you look at the Japanese concept of ikigai, like where they have purpose and passion. And a lot of people in our culture, when they retire, specifically, have no purpose, no passion. They don't have, especially men, where their identity was their job. This is changing, obviously, as women, a lot more women are working. But when you had more like the matriarch that was head of the home, she was involved at the church and, had the grandkids and, hung out with the other mothers and did, bingo night and blah, 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 covered dish and this thing and that thing. And the guy, it's like, when he retires, it's like, what do you do? I used to work at GE or IBM or, whatever. And it's like, now I do nothing. Like men weren't as good at like keeping connection. Their connections were from work. Their identity was from work. And, you're seeing like those things kind of evolve, right? Like where unfortunately women are coming into some of that, but there's also an awakening there that I think our identity can be shifted to other things, like where we can have deeper friendships, deeper connection at meals, like these blue zones where, they have like 3 or 4 hour dinners. If you were to like in the US, it's all about like turning tables at restaurants, right? Like Like an hour and 20 minutes, this is way too long. We need to turn that table. Like in Europe, when you come in for dinner, that is your table for
the night.
the night. And it's like absurd if you were to like leave after like an hour or whatever. It's like there's just deep connection, and towns are families. And a lot of this is getting lost. And so I see these cultures like living much longer than people we call biohackers that are doing PRP and peptides and blue light and red light and cold plunges and blah. All these things are awesome. And if you don't have your purpose, passion, connection, then what's it all about? That's really important, is finding purpose, passion, connection, and then look at the biohacks. I also do like the idea that you're seeing the, if you will, like the masculine side of biohacking was kind of the hacking, the pills, the potions, the tests, the devices, the measurements and whatever. It's very masculine. But luckily we're seeing like intuition and ancient wisdom and what I would kind of call the feminine energy, like come into biohacking, where we're calling whatever human optimization and longevity, health span, where you're seeing like grounding and breath work and sunning and forest bathing and, all these things like prayer and meditation and affirmations and, all of those things are becoming relevant now too. And I think that's how I kind of look at this thing holistically. I think first and foremost, if you're not okay with you, then all of these biohacks to me can almost become more of a hindrance to, you see this in biohacking, like with the type A personalities that are like obsessed with all the things, and then it becomes another thing to obsess about and get sick about. What does my, Oura ring say? And what is like, like I didn't like do this peptide at this time. And like I was eating carnivore and like somehow I like, messed up and had cake. And, it's like all this stuff, like it's obsessions. And so you have to find a way to like grant yourself grace, be easy on yourself, find ways to make life difficult by your choosing, and in the process, be easy on yourself. I think that's really important. But certainly I think first and foremost, and kind of going full circle to what you were talking about before with the e-gaming, it really is like connection to self, to your lover, partner, spouse, connection to family, connection to God, connection to nature, like connect. And the worst thing we can do is be isolated. Once you're cut off, you can look at all the data. Health drops dramatically, as we talked about, like immune health, like depression, suicidal thoughts, but just everything just drops off a cliff.
Yeah.
And so we need to be connected.
Yeah, I love that. Let's just close out with one final question, which is a little bit around the space of gratitude. You're someone that I continue to love and look to, and I'm so blessed to call you mentor, brother, friend, all the things. And I just would love for you to share a little gratitude. I know it's going to be hard to pick, but someone over the course of the journey of your life that you feel really affected you, really, shouted you out, opened a door for you, high-fived you when you thought there wasn't much more for you to be high-fived about, or just really sent you on the path that you are on today. Giving a little shout out of gratitude to them.
Yeah, the first one that does come up is, and it always comes up for me when asked, is Todd and Cole.
So this is Todd and Cole Whitty, just for everybody who's listening from the Condor Approach and so many other places.
Yeah, they're here in Austin, and yeah, I was really in a very dark place, and I did my first journey with them going into New Year's 2020. And I was with a lot of celebrity people that are very well known in the biohacking and longevity space, like people that have many, many, many books. I'll say that. And I felt like the most insignificant person in the room. I ended up going pretty deep on this journey. I think a lot deeper than some other people. I think it was 5.5 grams or something like that, psilocybin. And I stayed in this cuddle puddle all night because I was just starved for touch, starved for connection, going back to that. I had isolated myself. I had given myself imposter syndrome, hated who I was. Like, it was never good enough, whatever I did. Like, if I was on Ben Greenfield, I needed to get on Joe Rogan and, that kind of stuff. And if I was on this stage, I needed to be on the bigger stage and, all the things. It just never enjoying any bit of it. I felt like love was fleeting, love was conditional, love was about what I could accomplish and how I could earn my way to value for the other people around me. And that was exhausting, and I felt like I never had like a net to fall into. And when I got deep in the space, like, my epiphany was that I could be loved, that I could have love as a human being, not a human doing. And that because all these people that were very well known and famous and didn't know who I was at all, they were surrounding me and checking in on me and caressing me and talking to me and seeing if I needed a blanket or some food or needed to go to the bathroom, or giving me like some funny thought or a smile. And it was like one of those time lapse kind of motion things, like where you see people kind of come in and around my like little spot on the floor where I was laying. And I just kept thinking, like, why would they care? Why would they do this? They don't know me. What value am I bringing? And then it hit me that, like, I can just be loved. I could just have love. And that was the epiphany. And the masculine part of my brain could have told you before this journey, that makes sense. But I had not anchored that in my heart. And it's a whole different experience when I was like, I felt that. Like, I literally stared at the ceiling after everyone was asleep for like 4 or 5 hours, and it changed my life path. It may sound like it's not a big deal. It's a really big deal. And everything shifted from there on out.
It's like the power of belief too, right? Really believing that to be, to your toes, a core piece of you, that you are lovable, that you have worth, that you have value. And it's not that because you do so much for so many people, and I've watched you work for years and years, and I've also watched you open up that landscape to not work yourself to death. And that you bring so much value, but just the art of not having to do anything, and your presence and your personality and your wisdom and just being, by being, people can love you, and we can accept it.
And that was the game changer, and incredibly blessed to have them in my life. I met people like you and brought you in and into these spaces, and that's been incredible too. And just plant medicine, and again, going back to access to plant medicine, like how much it changed everything. Like, I wouldn't be educating and touching all the lives that I am, like, without having had that. I would be in the ground. So, I'll go back to the idea of, even if it's not for you, would you allow access to people that are dying, that need it? Yeah, very blessed to have them in my life, and blessed to have you in my life. So thank you.
Same. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. You always bring a shining attitude, a beautiful shirt, a bright pair of shoes. I'm just stoked to have you here.
Thank you.
Stoked to have you here. Thanks so much, Shawn.
Yes, thank you for joining us here on Well Power. You can submit questions, learn more, shop incredible brands, and connect with me at wellpower.life, or follow me on social at biohacking.breath.cold. From comfort to courage, friends, we're doing it. Any foul language you hear is not approved by my mother.